Welcome back to the book club. Today's video is going to be a chat about The Pariah by Anthony Ryan. This is book one of the Covenant of Steel trilogy, and the cover art is pretty cool. I'm digging the vibe of this. But this is a first person POV, single POV book, all taking place as sort of a diary of the life of this guy, Alwyn Scribe, who's the narrator throughout. There's a bunch of references to like the Dear Reader and that kind of thing. So it's kind of the idea is this is kind of like the diary of this guy that we found and now we're reading through. A little bit about, the book and the world. There's very little magic throughout this book. It's really a story of Alwyn Scribe, who starts off as an outlaw. Some events happen to him that sort of change the course of his life. And then he goes on a little adventure from there. He picks up a few side characters throughout, and there's kind of three main acts. The first act is his life as an outlaw and something that happens to change that, and then acts 2 and 3 are kind of these different segments of his life as he sort of progresses along on his journey. um Overall, my thoughts on this book are that I frankly didn't really enjoy it by the end. I was really into the first third. I was kind of into the second third, and then by the last third, I was kind of over it and hoping that it would be done. The book is about, I want to say 600 pages, 550 pages in my copy at least. And frankly, it could have been half as long and told the same exact story. I felt like it was a little bit meandering. The pace was kind of all over the place. I'm not sure about you guys, but I typically expect that when I'm reading the back of the book, it's kind of like this is what's going to happen within the first, I don't know, 100 pages, 1/3 of the book, something along those lines. And it's really just like a setup to, hook you into the story, and it's things that you're going to find out pretty quickly. In this case, there's some things mentioned on the back of the book that don't happen until over halfway through the book, maybe more than halfway. I'm not exactly sure when some of the things happen, but it references him becoming a soldier. You will not see him being a soldier until you're about 2/3 of the way through the book. That just like, it kind of sets up this very weird expectation where you think maybe the book is going to move a little bit faster than it does, but it takes quite a while to get there. And frankly, that kind of lost me a bit. Um, Another thing to mention is that I felt like the world building was pretty flat. I really like reading books that have deep world building. I recently finished reading through the Malazan Book of the Fallen. I think that's maybe, too high of a pedestal for world building to compare other books to. But, that's the style of thing I usually like. The deeper the world building, the better. I really like a lot of Brandon Sanderson's stuff. I think he does a lot of really cool world building, especially in Stormlight Archive. Here, the world felt just like very generic, very typical medieval fantasy, very boring. You have like these Norse Viking like people to the north. You have just a glut of people in the middle that are just all a part of some kingdom, and there's a little bit of battle between a king and a pretender or a rebel army and that kind of thing going on. But honestly, the character travels across. There's a map in the beginning. The character travels, from the middle of the map towards the south and then up towards the north throughout the book. And in my mind's eye, I was failing to really picture what anything looked like. You're sort of you understand that as he's an outlaw, he lives in this forest area, and so I picture a bunch of trees while I'm reading that, and then everywhere else he goes, I just kind of don't picture anything, or I just picture a tree or a cave or whatever. But I feel like maybe it's the author, maybe it's Alwyn Scribe himself, fails to describe the world and the environments very well, and the actual events that are sort of happening within the world are just very plain and very generic, which I think kind of fits the historical military fiction vibe of the book, but just isn't what I'm interested in, and is sort of why I was struggling to keep reading it. Um, the other reason why I'm not just very sold on this book is that there's a lot of side characters that pop up and sort of join Alwyn on his journey, but I felt like they were just very flat and not interesting because their story was never really told at all. And understandably so, it is told from the perspective of Alwyn Scribe. He's kind of writing this about his own life. But there's a couple characters that he picks up who have this trait where they just refuse to talk about their past in a kind of annoying way. It's like, oh, I'm scarred. I don't want to talk about my past. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. That's really interesting. I hope that means that we get to actually learn about it once they open up in the future. No, no, no. They just don't open up. They just don't open up. You never know about their past, and then they kind of go away, and you're like, who is this person? There's another person they kind of pick up in the last third of the book who you kind of learn nothing about, and I have no idea why anyone cares about him. Besides, he has this relationship to another character, but like that's not enough of an explanation as to like why Alwyn himself cares about this guy or like even bothers to write about him. So, I think that also ties into the pacing where there's a lot of time spent on, I think, the wrong thing or the thing that I don't care about. But it's kind of interesting to critique this book because overall it is pretty well liked, it seems, on Goodreads. The book's sitting at a 4.19 rating as of now, which is actually pretty good for the first book in a series. Typically what you see is the first book is the lowest, and the last book is the highest, because you sort of, the readers like me who aren't going to keep reading on drop off, give it a lower rating, blah, blah, blah. So it's not uncommon to see books, the first book in a series at like a 4 or lower, and then the last two books or the future books in the series being much higher. This book's sitting at 4.19, which is actually pretty good. I do think that there's a lot that people can find to enjoy in this book. If you like a slower paced book, if you like sort of the military fantasy kind of thing, you don't care about magic at all. That's another bias that I personally have, where I really enjoy magic systems. I like worlds that are magical. There's a little bit in this book. There's not enough that keeps me interested. And I think, maybe the last thing that I can talk about here that I didn't really vibe with or didn't really hook me is that I understand where overall books 2 and 3 are going to go, because there's some overall plot threads that are still lingering. What exactly happens with a few characters, and there's sort of this revenge arc that is mentioned on the back of the book and is sort of promised throughout that needs to be resolved. But the way that the book ends, like there's nothing actually that I care about that books 2 and 3 can cover. I kind of when I'm reading trilogies, and I've read a lot of trilogies, that's kind of the most common format for fantasy books. I expect book 1 to resolve something, but also set up, some mysteries for you to think about, and make you want to read books 2 and 3. As an example, I just a couple weeks ago finished the book Foundry Side, and that made me, the way that it ends, it really resolves a plot. I don't need to keep reading books 2 and 3, but there's a lot of mysteries that happen at the very end that really tease you and make you want to continue on in the series, even though I don't really know what's going to happen. In this book, I just didn't feel that at all. I kind of know that there's this rivalry between the king and the pretender. There's some vengeance arc with the main character related to the events that happened to him at the end of book 1 or act 1. But there's not really a motivation for me. There's not really like a big mystery for me to want to keep reading. Like there's not some existential threat that actually affects Alwyn, really, that ends the book and makes me wonder what happens next. Really, the only thing I wonder about is like, is magic more of a thing in this universe that I actually know? And if so, then I wish that was teased prior. And if not, then I'm glad that I didn't keep reading, to be honest. I'm very curious if people have the opposite reaction that I do with this book, why you feel that way, or what you feel about it, if you feel I'm off base or whatever. I feel like this is just a type of fantasy book that I just didn't really jive with. It just doesn't fit the sort of niche of fantasy books that I like to read. And it was just a little bit too dry, too meandering, and didn't really have enough to hook me. But I'm interested in what you guys have to say, if there was something in here that hooked you, or maybe if books 2 and 3 change a lot. Again, their ratings on Goodreads are higher than book 1. Maybe the story changes in a way that actually would be interesting to me. But as of now, I just don't plan on continuing to read the series. I am interested in. I haven't read anything else by Anthony Ryan. I'm interested in checking that out. I know he has a couple other trilogies that I think are pretty well reviewed, so I'm interested in reading those in the future, maybe giving them a try, seeing if it's something different that suits my tastes. But for now, the Pariah is going back on the bookshelf. I'm going to forget about Anthony Ryan for a little bit, and I'm currently reading The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, book 1 of the Wheel of Time. So that's kind of got its hooks in me now, and we'll see what's next. But thank you so much for watching. Let me know, like, comment, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff. Let me know what your thoughts are on this book. If you felt similar to me, if you felt like it was one of the best books you've ever read, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.